It's nice to see you again. Thank you so much for being here. I know you've got an action-packed session planned, so let's dive in. I'm going to ask you to introduce your panel. As you're going through the introduction of everyone, I'll go ahead and get them spotlighted for the rest of the audience, but the floor is yours. We're really excited to hear your topic of conversation today as we dive in. I think this is a little more technical conversation too, so welcome and thanks for being here.
Well, it depends how we drive it. It can be business, it can be technical, but really glad to be here. Just wanted to do a quick check, make sure all the panelists are here.
I think so. I'm going through the list right now.
Okay.
Phil is, I think the only one that I don't see is Bentzy.
Oh.
Bentzy,
yeah, and he said he'd be a couple of minutes late, so no worries.
Okay, so I'll keep an eye on the list and add him to your spotlight as you go. So
sounds good. Sounds good. So let's get started. Well, thank you, Wendy, and the HRTA team. It's great to be here as always. And good morning, afternoon, or maybe even evening to everyone who's joined us, depending on where you are. Really excited to be hosting this panel discussion today because we have a great lineup of our panelists here and who I will shortly introduce. But before I guess we begin, just wanted to do a quick check. I'm on a different computer than I usually use. So am I audible and can you see me? Okay. Perfect. So let me share my screen. There we go. So welcome again. And today our topic is people analytics, curate to get accurate. And I think given the theme of the theme for today's virtual collaboration zone, people analytics, it's very relevant because we are going to be touching upon the whole aspect of data preparation, curation to get accurate analytics, people analytics, and going to touch upon a lot of ground to cover, touch upon different aspects of that. And we have our panelists who obviously we're looking to share their expertise and their perspectives. So real quick, I'm Janhavi Padture. I am the, I basically head the HR tech line of business at Harbinger Systems. And as always, happy to be a part of this community, HRTA community. So with that, let's get started. So people analytics is, as we all know, it's a critical business driver. It's essentially what I think it's been probably talked about so many times, but I'll say it again. It essentially involves analyzing people data to gain key insights for businesses so that they can make data-driven decisions, evidence-based data-driven decisions. Basically, I think we're seeing this whole rapid shift of organizations to become data-driven organizations. And so people and HR analytics has gained tremendous momentum and importance. And it's the interesting thing is it's not just for the HR function, but the business as a whole. And I think it's quite evident why, because it touches upon two key aspects of the business itself, the business outcomes, strategy, and the people aspect, the culture, the softer things. On the business side, real quick, we talk about data-driven decision-making. It helps you to analyze. So for instance, are you trying to establish whether your pay for performance is going as you expected it to, or things like that. The other thing is it is a enabler for the HR function itself, people analytics. It helps our HR professionals do their job better. So recruitment for, recruiting the right kind of talent, right fit, enabling employee engagement across the organization. And last but not least, it's about predicting outcomes that might impact business down the line. So predictive analytics is big. Everybody hears about the attrition example, but there's so many examples of predictive analytics in people analytics. And then the softer aspect, coming to the softer aspect of culture and people analytics has plays a very, very important critical role in enabling, making sure that we are, enabling, enabling employee engagement or diversity, inclusion, or even helping in eliminating bias, as well as in talent management, where we're talking about learning, skills gaps, growth of employees. So really critical. And these are just some examples, but it can enable the HR function build a better organization, essentially from a people perspective. So that said, what is people analytics? It is really vast. I mean, it starts at, this for most of you who are here and are familiar with people analytics, you can tell this is an overly simplified visual of what is people analytics, starting with the data strategy itself, where you define your goals, what you're trying to accomplish through your people analytics. So are you trying to incorporate, DEI initiatives and so on, goes on to data preparation, curation, building HR models, testing out those models. And of course, when you test those, you want to improve them to make sure that, and then the machine learning aspect comes in and so on. And finally, you want to validate the outcomes against the goals that you set out to accomplish. So again, oversimplified, but even the oversimplified visual is kind of a vast scope. So for today's session, I think we're going to narrow our focus to just the data aspect of data strategy, starting with data strategy and then data preparation. And data strategy is critical because, defining your goals, whether, are you trying to look at talent management aspects like learning gaps and skills, or are you trying to do DE&I, diversity and inclusion initiatives? That's going to decide, pretty much dictate what your next step, which is data preparation and curation. So what data you're going to get, where you're going to get it from, and what you're going to do with the data. So we'll dive into some of these aspects, and for that, we have our panel ready to join us. So really excited to invite all of you here. So thank you all again for joining. We have Bentzy Goldman. I see Bentzy, hi, you were able to join. The founder of Perflo. We have Dr. Michael Moon. She's the director of Align Technology. Last but not least, Phil Schrader, solution architect at One Model. So super excited to have you. Looking at your backgrounds, I'm sure it's going to be a great session. If I may request you to sort of introduce yourselves, starting with perhaps Bentzy.
Hi, everyone. Apologies for being late. My name is Bentzy. I'm the founder of Perflo, and we are very much, we're taking a new approach to people analytics, bringing these type of helpful insights to managers and teams. And I'm very excited to join you all, to learn, and hopefully I can contribute something of value to you all. It's a very exciting time to be in people analytics, very exciting space. So I'm glad to be here and be with you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Betsy. Dr. Moon.
Hi, thank you for having me today. I'm Michael Moon. I currently serve as the Director for Global Talent Development Technology and Human Capital Analytics at a company called Align Technology, but I am a former HR technology analyst, and so have been a part of the HR tech space for a very long time, but my sweet spot, both from a technology and a practitioner perspective, is people analytics.
Great. And Phil?
Yes. My name is Phil Schrader. I'm a solution architect at One Model. So One Model is a people analytics provider. We do kind of end-to-end data orchestration, bringing data in from customer sources, modeling that data, doing data presentation work and metric definition, and then advanced data science on top of it as well. So as a solution architect, I get to walk through all of that on a daily basis and probably have some relevance to the conversation today, hopefully so. It's great to be here.
I'm sure. And what's exciting is I think your different backgrounds, you can bring in the technical and the, all of you can bring in the business and the technical considerations when doing data curation. So awesome. Let me, share that. Sorry, I had stopped sharing. So what's our game plan for today? Really simple. We'll touch upon 4 aspects. One is the importance of having quality data in people analytics, the challenges that we encounter in preparing the data curation, and some of the approaches and the process that is involved in data curation and how to address those challenges. And lastly, we'll touch upon some tools and technologies that might be useful for all of us in helping us with not just data curation, but also people analytics. So, and basically, I think just a little bit about Harbinger Systems. We are very familiar ourselves with this whole data journey, not just as an organization who's trying to, utilize people analytics effectively to drive our business processes and decisions, but also because we work with HR tech software vendors, helping them with their product development initiatives, so helping them with any kind of product development. And what we are seeing is an urgency in, among some of our customers in wanting to build in or develop the data integrations, as well as building analytics components into their platforms, because their end customers are wanting it now. So I'll share along the way some examples of the of our work and so on as well as it relates. But for now, let's talk about data. So what's the big deal about data? Of course, data is the new oil, as we've heard. And I'm going to defer this question to the panelists to get their views. But just on a lighter side note, if you search Google today on what's the most valuable resource in the business for businesses today, and your first result is data. And if you search Google on what's the most valuable asset to business, the first result is people. So I think it's not surprising then that people data and analytics around people data is so valuable, and businesses are paying so much attention to it. But yeah, that's just with that to kind of segue into our first question. And perhaps we can start with Phil this time, and just want to get your take on why this topic is important to you and the importance of having good data.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I've always or primarily worked in people analytics data. And what I've noticed from brief stints, outside of people analytics is that just the content area is so much harder with people data. I think that, challenges that people face are the systems have evolved a lot. You probably have your people data in a lot of different systems. It's hard to pull all that together, but more fundamentally, you're tracking something, when you try to track people and their careers through the organization, you are dealing with such an incredibly complex topic. People are a lot more than clicks on a web page. They're more than an order going through, an inventory system. People are evolving and changing all of the time. They're having different experiences. They're very multifaceted, obviously. And just trying to capture a person in data is, I think we need to attempt it as part of the work that we do, but we need to be incredibly humble about it. And it brings all of the challenges of doing data really well to the forefront. When you're trying to track people over time, you need to, for example, really master the concept of time. People are very different from year to year. You can't just look at a snapshot of one point in time. You have to think about, where was this person in the context of their career at this point in time when they did this thing? And capturing all of that in a database and learning how to query that and thinking about it, even so that you can just get to that really minimal approximation of the complexity of somebody learning and growing at work. It's a ton of work. So I think we have to be humbled. We also have to really apply ourselves so that we're not we're not underestimating the problem or being overly simplistic in how we think about people. And I'll try to, dig into this a little more. But for me, at One Model, it always comes back to time. And we have kind of the question there of like, what does good data mean? Good data means effective data in my mind. To boil it way down, knowing somebody had a performance review score, or they did an engagement survey, or they were at a particular part of the organization, when, and you need to be able to say almost arbitrarily, as of June 17th, 2 years ago, what was true about this person at that point in time and what is now the case. So my simple answer, I have to boil it down, good data is effective data. And I'll turn it over to, I think we're going reverse order. So I'll go to Dr. Moon maybe next, or let you route things.
And Phil, you have me starting to jump to the challenges, so I'm gonna save that. But I absolutely echo that. So what I wrote down in my notes ahead of time was it's having relevant access to relevant and timely data, right? So that point in time doesn't tell you that much, but it's also about having data that is actually it's using that data in an appropriate way. So you may have tons of data, but if you're not actually using it, for good, right? It's like as one article I wrote, right? Using data for good and not evil, then it doesn't matter how good the data is in and of itself. I think the other thing is that, I think the basic question you asked, how important is quality data? Well, I think it's somewhat of a rhetorical question. It's really important. However, we must not let it become so important that we are constantly seeking the perfect data set, the cleanest data set, the exact data that's going to be the holy grail to answer every question. And so that sort of bridges a little bit of what the challenge is that people are looking for that. They think that my data has to be absolutely pristine before I can actually generate any insight or do anything meaningful from it. So for me, the good data, right, is data that is useful, timely, relevant, and is used in its appropriate, used for the appropriate things.
Yeah, there's not much to add to it. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. So just to elaborate on your last point, Doctor, there's quality data, and then is that data answering the questions that we have or current business challenges? And I'll probably speak to this later in terms of current business challenges and current business needs, as opposed to this is people analytics and this is the type of data that people analytics needs to collect and analyze and report on. But the question is that data helpful? And then also to your point, if we're going to have 100% of nothing or 70% of something, rather take 70% of something, even 60%, because really the point is to ask questions and incite conversations as to why things are happening, as opposed to just saying, this is happening, 100% this is happening, and this is what we need to do. It's like, this is a starting point to look at why things are happening and then have conversation around that and then look deeper. So really, any indicative data is a starting point, even if it's not 100% accurate, and you know that, and you always have to take that, even if, there's what's 100% accurate. But I think any starting point is good, and just have in mind what other variables could be correlated to that data that you think this is 100%, quality data, but what is everything that we maybe not thinking of, any biases involved with looking at that specific data?
Yeah, or what are the limitations? Let's at least call them out, the limitations of this data, but we still can use it. Yes, it'd be great if we also had this, and that, and there's information inside we don't have, but that doesn't mean that what we can generate for this may not be useful.
Yeah, and I think to emphasize too, what you said is that it is the conversation that's useful at the end of the day. The data itself, we can say data is like the most valuable thing, but the conversation you have in business. So if you have a metric, you're looking at time and role, that's interesting. You could look at it over time, maybe there's a trend or something, but really it's interesting to say, how long does it really take someone to get effective in this role? why is that the case? And to discuss that with the manager and then talk about the processes. So the data itself is the most important thing and the least important thing all at once. And the conversation is the most important thing. So
yeah, and that kind of ties in with, that sort of ties in with what you said earlier, to Phil, that it's a continuum. So aiming for perfection at the very beginning versus, just trying to get good enough data, kind of that whole continuum of data curation. I think that's what we're talking about here. So great.
Yeah, and when I first asked about the panel and kind of what does data curation mean, of course, I went to my friend Google, as well as asking, the group, but the primary definition of that is it's about making data useful, making it and adding value through data, not just about having data and analyzing it. So I think that's really good points that we're all making here.
Absolutely. No, thank you. And I think these are some great points about, just the data, the usefulness of the data, the continuum, the relevancy and timeliness of data versus trying to look for that perfect data. So, I think that's great. And I think let's then move on. Probably a good segue into our next kind of topic, which is the challenges, which Dr. Moon alluded to earlier, but just thought I would share just some quick, we're talking data analytics. And so just thought some industry trends would be interesting on data as well as HR analytics to share. So I found out that data produced by enterprises is growing like at a rapid rate of 40 to 60% every year. But companies are only using about 10% of the data that they produce. In fact, 55% of the data that organizations collect is what they call dark data, meaning it's not usable. Part of it because they don't even know it exists, but even when they know for various reasons, it's not usable. And then global HR analytics market is expected to really double by 2024. And Harvard Business Review is saying that survey reports 55% organizations are really weak at predicting data. Predicting performance from their HR data. So, a lot of these things telling us the importance of people analytics is going to grow. And sure enough, I found a very recent research by Red Thread, research on people analytics technologies. And it's really booming at this time. There's nearly 121 PAT vendors on the market. And the one-year growth itself has been 35%, market expected around $2 billion. So that's quite a telltale sign in my mind that it's very critical. And then this kind of visual or statistic is also kind of a great segue into our next question is, okay, we have all the data, but it's a baggage deal, right? It has its challenges. But so the survey conducted, I think it was joined by Splunk and another company, why companies aren't able to use dark data. And that's because top reason is no tool, data is missing or incomplete, too much data to handle, or can only access structured data. And I think that really is a perfect segue into talking about some of the real challenges when handling data for people analytics and preparing it for people analytics. So let's do our panel again. Maybe Michael, if you want to go first and talk to us.
Sure. Yeah, Phil's touched on this. Oh, now I'm getting an echo. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Phil touched on this earlier, right? It's about time, right? So not having systems that will allow us to effective date and be able to look at what was that data in any given point in time makes it really difficult to do linkage analysis. Additionally, if we're using latent constructs like measuring things like engagement or turnover intention through a survey, right? You can't make those direct connections from that kind of data to, say, stock performance or some other financial number or business outcome, because it needs to be time series based. So there are challenges about being able to collect that data on a regular basis to do some of those connections. But I think the biggest one, there's two more, is accessing the data, and that can be both just getting approval to get the access to the data, but the other is just having access to the data. The data may not even exist, right? And so how do you start to capture that, store that, and start to be able to retrieve it? But I also, what I run into when, before going back into the practitioner world, working as an analyst and working in doing system selections, and then now that I'm back as a practitioner, it's also just trying to make sure that the people are ready for it, right? So we may have this really great, set of people and skills and technologies that are available to us, but not everybody in the organization is quite ready to go there yet. So I'm going to be doing O&A, I'm going to be doing all these other, yeah, that's really awesome, but we're not right. It's baby steps. So I think the challenges are really around accessing, getting more frequent data, so you have that time series, so you can do that deeper analysis of linking the people to the business, and also just getting the rest of HR and even your business leaders and managers to start to buy into the importance, but more importantly, like the readiness to actually use that data to change the way that they do their jobs.
That's an interesting point you made, the last one about the buy-in, and I wasn't even thinking of that, but that's a huge one, getting that buy-in and changing your ways of doing things differently. So,
yeah, I mean, I teach people analytics and decision making at Columbia University, and the students it's in the master's program for human capital management. These are all HR and recruiting professionals. And even with this group, which are they're probably average age or at late 20s. 1 second.
Sure. Bentzy?
Sorry about that. In a hotel for a couple of weeks. I just relocated, so there was a sound next door. But even with working with those and getting them to actually buy into why they would need to know what regression is, why they would need to understand what, how to structure a function, being evidence-based, there's a lot of resistance still. And it was surprising to me. I've been teaching there for a year. So, I think having not had that experience, I'm like, oh yeah, everybody's on board with this. But I'm seeing there's still a lot of resistance.
Yeah, good points. And maybe Bentzy, if you want to talk about the challenges of data curation and preparation that you've seen.
Sure. I'm not going to speak too much out of turn because I'm not a practitioner that has these challenges, but I do speak to a lot of people, and I hear their complaints or challenges, and we're solving for one of them, which is timely, continuous, relevant. I think one of the biggest things I've heard is I think you mentioned this, priority in terms of like the business. So specifically in like mid-sized companies more than maybe enterprise, although I'm sure it extends to enterprise, is if you have limited resources or time and skills in terms of the people that can help you with data collection, curation, analysis, etc., right, outside of HR analytics. And there's all these different business units asking them for help, whether this is dev, analysts, etc., asking that we need this day, we need this now, and then the people analytics department is also like, we need this and we need this now, we need these skills, and you're fighting with other departments for resources. So I think that is like maybe taking a step back to actually the challenge of getting data. It's having access to the skills and people you need to feed you that data. So that's something I've heard. I'd love to hear Dr. Moon and Phil's perspective on this as well. And then again, going back to timely, by the time you get data, where you get it from, and then you have to verify, for example, like skills data, this is what I hear a lot, totally outdated. And some people like left the company, and like I've heard like these crazy stories of like analyzing ex-employees' data. So I think that it's important, again, to prioritize, like, if you're going to have limited resources, what data should we prioritize that we need to get? How do we become a priority in all the access requests backlog? And again, just asking the right questions of, like, what is it the most important for now? So that if you're going to have limited resources and access, at least when you get some access, make sure that you're getting the priority.
Sure.
Phil, any thoughts?
Yeah. Oh, I can let you go first, Michael, and then I can chime in.
No, I'm going to add in one last little story when you're done.
Oh, it sounds good. I'll try to keep the thread so it doesn't. But I actually, coming back to some of the things you were saying about readiness, and you're talking about, some very talented high-end students in your programs who are potentially still not ready for data. And, that I don't know the answer to it, but I feel like the theme that I see over and over again, and I get really cranky about, is, we have this sort of constant, like, I feel like, even this discussion, we kind of teed it up as, oh, this is going to be more technical, business technical. And I think there's this desire for specialization in the work that we do to try to solve some of these problems. Like, when we have now data scientists and analysts, and we have data engineers who are not analysts, and we have data architects who figure out and we specialize to try to solve these problems, which is normal. But at the same time, every time we specialize, we kind of build new walls between understanding, and no one is really going end to end through it. And I just worry that, I think one of the things that makes data so hard is we say, well, we have to figure out how to talk to the business about how the data needs to be structured. And then the business they don't need to get involved in the technology, and we kind of isolate ourselves. And as a result, no one's seeing the whole picture anymore. And then when we have challenges, we respond to those challenges with increased specialization, and we dig the trench deeper between, the work, and really, so I don't know the answer to it necessarily. You talked about, Dr. Moon, talking about getting people ready for regression analysis. I don't know if the answer is like slowing down more, but at the same time, to gain investment in organizations, you have to tell a good story about what you're going to do. You're not just going to count data, you're going to do data science.
Right.
And now you're kind of bringing so much more into that. You're going to need new skills and new resources to make that happen. So, I think it's like we're confounding ourselves as we try to solve it. And if you guys have the answer to that, I'll go back. I think let you answer.
Yeah, in the class, like, we spend the first half of the semester doing statistics, right? Nothing super fancy, right? They don't even have to calculate it, right? It's really about interpreting. And so they can speak the language, what we teach them to be human BS detectors. And then we talk about storytelling, making decisions, how to actually communicate your findings, which is so really the role that HR should play, but they have to understand how the data got generated in the first place. But the story I wanted to share was, I didn't mention this, that previously I was at ADP for 4 years, and I worked on our analytics and benchmarking product as part of professional services, delivering consulting services to clients. And our job was to help drive adoption of the software. And time after again, like, we'll open up the headcount metric. You're like, that's not my headcount, right? So technology is what is the enabler, but it's not the answer, because if your data isn't good, back to the first statement in the first place, and you don't understand how data gets into the system, what are all the ways it could be manually changed, what's the timing of, so the processes and the workflows about how that transactional data at least is getting generated. You don't have that figured out, and you don't have a clean process around that. Right, then all you're doing is aggregating data that's, you're missing. We've done, demographics on gender. Or job codes. Looks like you didn't actually upload job codes as part of your implementation. Well, we didn't really need that for payroll, so we didn't think it was important. But it is if you want to do analysis on job family. And so there's that lack of disconnect of understanding about how you set up your systems and the workflows, the processes, how you keep that data clean, right? Your data governance. That is going to lead to the ability to make that data useful for both yourself and HR, but also for the business. And I think that is an area where I think vendors could, and it's really services, but there's technology too that can help. And I know some of them on this call today that shall remain nameless, right, have ways to help draw attention to missing data, improperly formatted data, right? Help the customer figure out, how do I deal with this vast thing called data? I don't know where to start. Right? And I think those things that's part of the challenge too, is just not knowing where to start. So.
Yeah, but I also think bringing in and talking about how the vendor's role in this, I think, is really interesting, because I mean, we're sort of an aggregator of data, so I don't have as much of a horse in this race.
Yeah.
But if you see the evolution of, like, you know, kind of HRBP and recruiter facing technology, and where the analytics come into those tools, it's all about like kind of really boiling it down and making it look like an infographic and making the analytics page look really like cool and everything, right? Which is great. But it's also how we've ended up, like, not to name names, but like how we've ended up with a generation of, say, applicant tracking systems that don't give you effective dates on statuses, because they're trying to show like a current point in time in a really elegant way. And then they're concerned that they're going to lose users by making it too complicated. And so the data is actually really minimized, you know, and because they're trying to make it like super consumable at the expense of actually collecting and storing and processing a richer data set. And I think we need to find that balance, because we make our problems worse if we try to dumb things down, sacrifice data, make an interactive app that's really fun but doesn't tell us anything, and we spiral downward again. So I don't know that either, but yeah.
Can I add one point quickly? Starting at the bottom of the funnel, I suppose, or the top of the funnel, with people that are responsible for inputting data on a day-to-day basis, and they may not even realize it's managers, employees, whatever it may be, can be, and I wonder how sort of involved they are in. I feel like they could be a lot more involved in the whole people analytics process in general, because most of the data, you know, you're not responsible for, you know, who's putting, you can't control, you know, if people are updating their profiles, or people or managers are putting in the right data or putting it in at the right date. I could put it in 2 months later. So I think maybe getting like more of a collective ownership on the whole process from the beginning will definitely help. And it goes back to data quality or challenges of gathering data, like getting buy-in from literally employees, managers, you know, heads of department, whatever it may be, to be like, hey guys, we're all in this together. The better the data, the better the results, the better we can serve you, and, you know, the better our company can run, and everyone obviously at the end of the day is more effective and happier. So I wonder if you see this happening, or at what scale, and if you think it's even possible, it's like completely out of reach. That was a question.
That was,
Yeah.
yes. I
Michael,
think you're on mute, Michael.
Yeah, no, I think it's possible. I'll put my practitioner hat back on right now. I could talk somewhat. We'll see. Can't talk too much about my current role, but what I can say is that I have a very strong partnership. The people analytics, or the human capital analytics function, I sit with inside global talent. So global HS sits over here, I sit here, which it can happen in a lot of organizations. So I think I'm building that relationship with the person who's in charge of the systems where this data and the workflows and processes, so that they can start, because they don't understand necessarily how what they're doing, that whole system, right, can affect the ability to do other things down the road. So it's definitely can be done. It's not easy, but it has to be a purposeful thing that it has to be purposeful. It's not going to just accidentally happen.
Yeah.
And then there'll always be some parts of it which will be out of our control, because sometimes we are getting data from external systems, external sources, legacy data, which really is beyond our control. So yeah, there will be, I think, but as much as we can help and influence, I think get that control and ownership is important. It would be a key.
And I think the use of the term curate is really good for this discussion, because it carries that underlying sense of caring, and it's not going to happen by accident. I think, the great stories about data, if you think even beyond people data, but everyone's read Moneyball and everyone wants to do Moneyball stuff with their data, but those analytics are coming from groups of people who probably reorganize their baseball cards 50 times a year. Like they just care about it at a deep level. And so there's no escaping the need to, like, you have to care about your recruiting data. You have to care about your engagement data. You have to have people who,
hey, Tom, how you doing, bud? Let me just put my headphones on real quick. Bear with me.
Not to be too lofty about it, but you have to have people who are approaching data, which is it's a kind of objective technical thing, but approaching data with a sense of like loving care, and you're going to get good data as a result of that. And you have to just kind of want the data. You have to pore over the data, think about the data, not try to use technology to make it go away or to automate it away. That's obviously important, but there has to be a sense of like desire there too.
And then always keeping sight on what you're trying to do. What's your end goal, right? Just gathering data for the sake of is probably not going to be very efficient or effective. So I guess that's, I wanted to check with Michael, are you okay on time? Because
Yeah, I can answer one more question. Then I apologize to everyone today that I have a prior conflict that I have to drop off for.
No problem. That's why I thought I'll do a time check, and I was going to share a quick example. But our next, we talked about challenges, all these real challenges. Maybe let's talk about, because we don't want to miss hearing your perspective on that, on what are some of the approaches to resolving these issues. What's for you some best practices? What's the process of data curation, if you will? How do you solve for these challenges?
I don't know that. No, I think when I think about actually getting the data, right? When I go back to that original of like importance of having good or quality data, I really adhere to kind of evidence-based management principles that have been put forth in the HR space, have been put forth by people like Denise Rousseau and Rob Reiner. Where we look at what's called the 6 A's, right? So I'm never going to remember all of them, right? But it's, are we asking the right questions up front so we know what data we should be getting in the first place? So that's your first A. And the second is then acquiring that data and then appraising that data, judiciously appraising it for evidence, right? And combining that with other data through qualitative data, through having conversations and focus groups. So I call it kind of this 360-degree way of actually curating the data that I call it also the data sandwich. So using that qualitative approach to listening, getting artifacts, reading what's being written externally, right? Talking to people internally, and then deciding, well, what data, right, do we acquire? Then we do the analysis. Then we can apply the qualitative again, which is like the sandwich. So the qualitative, quantitative, qualitative. And it's this iterative process. So I think for me, best practice is also about, remember, it's a journey and not a destination. Obviously not my quote. And then the last is that cleaning the data, right, is definitely a chore, but keeping in that way is the real challenge. And so in that case, I think it's having clear defined ownership and data stewards and data governance, right, around changes that may be made to systems, about creating even data dictionaries and creating more training and awareness for HR and HR stakeholder manager line leaders, so they understand how the generation and the input of that data and the timeliness of doing that affects their ability to get the insights they need to make proper and effective decisions in a timely manner. So there's no one, like if you do these 3 things, you're going to be, all set. But there's like an omni-channel approach to thinking about how we're going to do data curation and data maintenance long-term.
Great. Anyone else on those comment? Anyone who wants to comment, Bentzy or Phil, on what you found works for data curation and what it entails, even like what do we mean when we say cleaning it or prepping it for to be used for analytics? So any insights?
Yeah, one thought that, in the work that we're doing at One Model, I think that a good standard to think about with whether, how well curated is your data is a sense of repeatability to your data. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't sometimes just grab Excel and just VLOOKUP the heck out of data for a while and try to see if something is there. But kind of an analogy that I bear in mind, when we're thinking about work is sort of, if you're making a road to go somewhere, you start with a path, you just like kind of walk there, you just kind of find your way. Then you end up building more of a trail so you can go back there if you need to. And then finally you build a road and you invest in paving it and making sure you can get there really effectively. And I think just kind of bearing that in mind, like as you're working through a problem, maybe you do an engagement analysis and it's just living in Excel and you knocked it out one time, but in the back of your mind thinking, what do I have to do to refresh this data next week? And what do I have to do to refresh it every day? What do I have to do to refresh it and make a copy for every leader in the organization every day? Like thinking about those stages, don't stop the work and don't try to build a road from day one. You're over investing, you're going to waste money and go to the wrong place. But if you're finding yourself walking through the same, part of the field every day and you're seeing your footprints and you're building a path, start to think about building a trail, start to think about paving the road, and that's your standard. If you can refresh the data without touching it and get it out to everybody, you now have well curated data. I mean, obviously it's accurate too. So that's the process I think about. And we think about data pipelines a lot in that regard. So that'd be my 2 cents on it. Turn over to Bentzy.
Yeah, I mean, luckily I don't do this, so I don't have to. But I'll tell you what I know from just other applications of this process is really the importance of having, and in startups you don't really prioritize process just because you want to move fast, but it's really, it goes back to that old adage of sharpening the axe before just cutting down the tree. Having a process in place that is documented and very well outlined, from the beginning, where does it come from? When was it updated last? Who's responsible for how it's going to play into the larger strategy? How's it converted, collected? Where's it going through? Just like mapping it out visually, an actual like flow chart, but for everyone to see. And so everyone knows, and this is my part in the journey, right? Going back to my comment on collective ownership of the process. So buy-in from everyone from beginning to end. And a lot of people don't know that they're part of the process. They just are. And then sometimes they're made aware of it. And then sometimes it's too late when you're trying to fix things. But everything from, the entire funnel, having that mapped out, like almost maybe do like a design thinking workshop on it. This could be like things that you already do, but just worth mentioning again. So like even maybe getting project like the PMO in terms of like a project management or governance framework involved, and just a project manager on it as well. So it's not like whose job is it to make sure that we're following this process and doing this governance. Because once you have a process that's repeatable, scalable, and you can tweak it, then you can just make those improvements over time. But if it's just like impromptu here and there, like we need this, we need that, like we're not following any type of framework, then you're just making your job harder, really. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's also like a really nice dose of reality hidden kind of in what you're describing, which is that whether you're in a startup mode or whether you're in the middle of a big organization, it is difficult to find the time and appetite to step back and kind of do everything right. And in reality, you operate in a really episodic way. You have data and maybe there's a big push to get, let's say diversity data ready to go for leaders. And then next year, it's going to be a big push about recruiting data. And then it's going to be a big push about engagement data. And so I think that if you're, leading that people analytics program, like the genius of it is if you can get really good at taking your projects and aligning them into a program. And there's a book called the Data Warehouse Lifecycle Toolkit, like really Data Warehouse Lifecycle Toolkit. It's like old book by the Kimball Group. It's really nerdy about data architecture and fact tables and dimension tables, but they talk about like for me, the big insight from that book is talking about going from project to program. So you have the program in mind, but it means that when you solved your diversity data stuff and you rolled it all out, and then it came around again and you were doing hiring data, your hiring data fits into your diversity data. And then when engagement data comes along, it fits into your recruit, and it all kind of, in piecemeal assembling the whole. If you do that well, then you can capitalize on all of those episodic things and make something that's really valuable. But I mean, bless you if you get the organizational mandate to do it all at once. You probably won't. You probably have to be really elegant about how you're kind of building it off to the side without telling anybody, just by answering people's project-based things. So yeah, I don't, project program, to me, that's like the big, magic trick.
Yeah, well put. Episodic, that was the word I was looking for.
There you go. Yeah, and not well put by me. The Kimball Group book is amazing. It's worth a read. It's not too technical, even if you're on the business side, read it, because you'll gain an understanding of what's going on.
That's great. And I think what both of you just said, it's very pertinent that having sort of a game plan, so to speak, right? Bentzy talked about having a process, a plan, step back. There should be ownership along the way. That process should be repeatable, like you said, Phil, right? I mean, next time you come in, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. So I think that those are great points. And I think that's something we have seen ourselves as well in the work we've been doing. So in fact, this may seem like a very technical, because we are a technology company, but this very much the process. So this goes to your point, and I thought that was a perfect segue into my next slide, Bentzy, this is our process. I mean, it's not like a patented or anything. This is just the standard process which we've sort of put a visual around, but these are the steps basically in data curation and analytics. And yes, it may seem technical that, we're talking about so many different data structures and data sources and integrations, transforming data, all of that stuff, storing the data in the data warehouse. But remember, along the way, there are business owners that work alongside. So to your point earlier that Phil, you raised about the siloed structure, and unfortunately that's happening, or the siloed roles that we are getting boxed into, so to speak. I'm a data architect, a scientist, or a business leader. Some of it comes from the complexity of the process, and really stepping back and just saying, this is a continuum, this is a process, whether we're talking integration and aggregation of data across various data sources. Yes, we're going to need technical resources to make it happen, but then the big picture, the business side of it, what we're looking to do, where we're going to access the data from, we need business ownership there as well. Cleaning up the data. I mean, I'm a programmer in my previous life form. Sometimes losing sight of the business needs in cleaning, you can try to aim for just too much perfection, and then that sometimes even that data, that when you're cleaning it up or structuring it, discovering it, even validating, you lose so much value in that data that sometimes it even is rendered useless at the end. So having that business and the technology kind of work hand in hand to say, okay, this is our, the big picture, this is the process we're going to follow. And it's repeatable. Like Phil was saying, today, if you're going to do DE&I analytics and tomorrow it's hiring, you don't want to reinvent the process and then go start looking for your who owns what and what's the process. So just thought that was perfectly said by both of you, and kind of fit in well with our experience as well in what we're doing. Just kind of to give you, I know we're running very close to the time, but very quickly, one example that comes to mind of a platform for employee and company relocation that, that's one of our customers. We actually dealt with, and again, not all of these steps or challenges will apply to every business problem or analytics problem, but it's a combination. So there were like external data sources that they were getting, their own employee data, or not, their customers' employee data, their own relocation package data, supplier data, like right from airlines and hotels and things like that, and trying to integrate that, making sense out of it. And one of the insights they were trying to surface as well, who are one of the top suppliers, not just based on their cost or their proximity to the employee, but also other things like how quickly, the speed of servicing, their rating, and all of that stuff. So I think just being vigilant about the process that's involved and what data you need and how much curation you need is very key to solving some of these challenges. With that, I know we have very little time, but maybe if you can take like 30 seconds each talking about some of the tools and technologies that you've used for data analytics. I think that'll be great for our audience. And at this point, I think anybody else who's on the session with us, any participants, please feel free to chat in. I think it will just be generally useful for everyone. So Bentzy, any thoughts on the technologies?
I mean, how biased can I be?
I'm sorry?
I was just kidding about if I can do shameless plugging, but
yes, you can.
I think that I really like the concept of, I don't know if this is related to this specific question in terms of curation, but rather maybe a source, is now that people have moved on to new tools in terms of digital collaboration, maybe Slack, Microsoft Teams, there's a lot of new data that maybe wasn't part of the old strategy or just process. And then a lot of I mean, Google, Microsoft, AWS, whatever you're using, or one of your partners, like they can also help with this, but there's a lot of new data that you can access, which may make it more complicated or may help. But it's definitely goes back to, it's very timely. And I just thought I'd mention it because I specifically maybe with like ONA, I don't know if people are still, using email before they were on Slack or Teams. So like, there's a whole new world, I don't know if like some of these some of the tools like Miro, I don't know if they have like APIs, but there's a lot of project management tools that so many, I mean, that's what we're looking at. It's like looking at work tools, productivity data, not like number of emails sent. I mean, like actually getting like down and dirty into day-to-day stuff. It's obviously hard because it's not all teams use the same tools and they don't all use it the same, and it's just like gets complex. But just looking at this whole new world and then looking at tools that can surface that. There are some, you want actually names of tools?
Yes, please.
Okay. So
I'm just going to chime in. We're really pushing to the clock here, folks. So
yeah, maybe
we need to wrap it up.
Yep.
Yeah, full go for it while I find this tool I saw the other day.
Sure. Well, obviously, outside of shamelessly mentioning one model at this point, because that's what we do, I think the best tool personally, the best tool you have in your disposal is to learn to make yourself a friendly nuisance to technical people and getting at the actual raw data and learn a little bit of SQL. And then there will be no secrets that they can get from you, and you will understand where your data is coming from. So that is my number one recommendation.
I think that's the best advice and the best sort of note to end it on. But hopefully we can share some offline. I know we are on the half hour, so time is up. But I know there are some good tools like Power BI and Tableau for self-serve analytics, and then there's so many more vendors starting to build analytics into their platforms. So just I think with that, let's wrap it up. I know it's time for the next session, so I want to thank you.
Just a thought, we're going to kind of continue some of these same thoughts. So if everyone would like to stay on, we have a number of questions that were submitted to us from a number of HR companies and people that are in the people on the HCM space. So some of the topics we've just been discussing now are actually a few things we're going to carry over into the next session as well.